in the deep, Spanish moss-draped corners of the South Carolina Lowcountry. The legal system was for nearly a century synonymous with a single family name. The Murdaugh family wielded unprecedented influence across the 14th Judicial Circuit, an area encompassing 5 counties where they served as the chief prosecuting attorneys for 3 consecutive generations. To the local residents, they were the law incarnate. They built an empire on personal injury litigation while simultaneously controlling the criminal dockets, creating a network of power, wealth, and undeniable authority. But beneath the veneer of Southern aristocracy and legal prestige, a labyrinth of deception was quietly unraveling. This is the comprehensive examination of the fall of the Murdaugh dynasty, a case that captivated the world not merely for the tragedy it encompassed, but for the intricate web of forensic evidence, financial fraud, and digital footprints that ultimately brought a seemingly untouchable figure to justice. At the center of this tragedy were Margaret Murdaugh, known affectionately as Maggie, and her youngest son, Paul. Maggie was 52 years old, widely described by friends and family as a devoted mother with a gentle demeanor. She had a profound love for her family and spent much of her time caring for the family's extensive property and their beloved dogs. Paul, at 22, was a young man standing at the crossroads of his life. While he carried the weight and expectations of his family's formidable surname, those closest to him remembered his fierce loyalty to his friends and his deep connection to the outdoors. Their lives were anchored at Moselle, a sprawling 1,700-acre hunting estate located in the rural, isolated community of Islandton. Moselle was meant to be a sanctuary, a vast expanse of pine forests, swamps, and agricultural land where the family could escape the pressures of their public lives. Instead, on the evening of the 7th of June 2021, this secluded haven became the focal point of one of the most complex criminal investigations in modern American history. To truly understand the events of that evening, one must look back to a freezing night in February 2019, an event that served as the catalyst for the dynasty's eventual collapse. Paul Murdaugh, then under the legal drinking age, was operating his family's boat with several friends on board. The vessel crashed violently into a bridge piling, resulting in the tragic loss of a 19-year-old woman named Mallory Beach. In the immediate aftermath at the hospital, witnesses reported that Alex Murdaugh arrived and began moving from room to room, allegedly attempting to orchestrate the survivor's statements to protect his son from criminal liability. This was the Murdaugh playbook in action, utilizing presence and authority to manage legal exposure. However, the Beach family refused to be silenced and filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit. This lawsuit was the persistent, ticking clock that threatened to expose everything Alex had spent years hiding. The facade of the wealthy, successful litigator was entirely illusory. For years, Alex had been orchestrating an elaborate and massive financial scheme, systematically embezzling millions of dollars from his own law firm, his partners, and most distressingly, his clients. The depths of his financial betrayal were staggering. In one particularly egregious instance, the family's longtime housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, sustained fatal injuries following a fall on the Murdaugh property in 2018. Alex encouraged her grieving sons to file a claim against his own homeowner's insurance policy, promising that the settlement would secure their financial future. When the insurance company paid out over $4 million, Alex routed the funds into a fraudulent bank account he had created under a name deceptively similar to a legitimate financial disbursement company. The Satterfield family never received a single cent. He used these stolen funds, and millions more, from other vulnerable clients, to maintain an extravagant lifestyle, cover mounting debts, and feed a severe, long-standing opioid dependency. The walls of this financial house of cards were rapidly closing in on the very day of the tragedy at Moselle. On the morning of the 7th of June 2021, the chief financial officer of Alex's law firm confronted him in his office regarding hundreds of thousands of dollars in missing legal fees. This was a critical juncture. The firm was demanding answers, and an audit was imminent. Furthermore, a highly anticipated hearing for the Mallory Beach civil lawsuit was scheduled for June 10, just 3 days away. At this hearing, a judge was expected to rule on a motion that would compel Alex to disclose his comprehensive financial records. Such a disclosure would have immediately exposed his years of embezzlement, leading to professional ruin, financial devastation, and guaranteed criminal prosecution. At exactly 10:06 that evening, the Colleton County 911 Dispatch Center received a frantic call. On the line was Alex Murdaugh. His voice was breathless and highly distressed as he reported that he had just returned to the Moselle estate to find his wife and son severely injured near the property's dog kennels. Law enforcement and emergency medical personnel were immediately dispatched to the remote location. Upon their arrival, first responders encountered a deeply tragic and solemn scene. Both Maggie and Paul had sustained fatal ballistic injuries and were pronounced deceased at the location. In accordance with strict investigative protocols, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, commonly referred to as SLED, was called in to take jurisdiction over the case. SLED agents systematically secured the perimeter, illuminated the dark rural property with floodlights, and began the meticulous process of evidence collection. During the initial phase of the investigation, Alex presented a clear and seemingly verifiable alibi. He told investigators that earlier in the evening, he had dinner with his family before taking a brief nap on the couch. Following his rest, he stated he left the Moselle property to visit his elderly mother, who was in the late stages of Alzheimer's disease, at her home in nearby Alameda. He claimed he was away from the estate during the time the fatal incident occurred, only discovering the tragic scene upon his return. In the days and weeks that followed, the local community rallied around the grieving father and husband. Law enforcement maintained a tight seal on the details of their investigation, leading to rampant public speculation. However, behind closed doors, investigators were beginning to encounter significant anomalies. There were no signs of forced entry at the estate, and no immediate evidence of a robbery. Most concerning to forensic investigators was the ballistic evidence recovered from the scene. Shell casings found near the victims indicated the use of two distinct firearms, a shotgun and a rifle chambered in .300 blackout. Through meticulous record checking, investigators discovered that Alex had previously purchased two custom .300 blackout rifles for his sons. One of those specific rifles was mysteriously missing from the property's gun room. The presence of family-owned ammunition and the specific caliber of the missing weapon cast a shadow of suspicion over the estate itself. Law enforcement professionals and forensic psychologists often examine the concept of an extinction burst, a desperate escalation of behavior when a person's established methods of survival are threatened. The theory that emerged was that the events at Moselle were a calculated, albeit desperate, attempt by Alex to generate profound sympathy, halt the inquiries into his finances, and buy time. This theory gained immense traction following a bizarre incident in September 2021, 3 months after the loss of Maggie and Paul. Alex called 911 again, this time claiming he had been the victim of a drive-by shooting while changing a tire on a rural road. He sustained only a superficial injury. However, the subsequent investigation quickly unraveled his narrative. It was revealed that Alex had orchestrated the entire event, attempting to hire a distant associate to end his life, so that his surviving son, Buster, could collect a multi-million-dollar life insurance policy. This staged event shattered any remaining public trust and demonstrated to investigators that Alex was highly capable of orchestrating complex deceptions and utilizing extreme measures when cornered. The true triumph of the Murdaugh investigation was not found in traditional forensic evidence like fingerprints or DNA, but in the pioneering application of digital telemetry and data analysis. In the modern era, human beings are surrounded by devices that constantly record their movements, communications, and interactions. SLED investigators working alongside experts from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, conducted a masterclass in digital forensic reconstruction. They began by seizing the mobile devices belonging to Alex, Maggie, and Paul, as well as extracting the onboard computer data from Alex's vehicle, a Chevrolet Suburban. By synchronizing the data from these various sources, investigators built a microscopic, second-by-second timeline of the evening of June 7. Maggie's phone activity ceased permanently at 8:49 in the evening. Paul's phone activity, which had been constant all evening as he communicated with friends, also ceased abruptly at 8:49. This established a definitive window for the tragedy. Alex had told investigators, unequivocally and repeatedly in multiple recorded interviews, that he had not been down at the dog kennels at all that evening. He maintained he had stayed at the main house, taken a nap, and then left to visit his mother. The digital evidence told an entirely different, irrefutable story. The most critical breakthrough in the entire case came from the most unlikely of sources, Paul Murdaugh himself. During the forensic extraction of Paul's cellular device, investigators discovered a video recorded on the application Snapchat. Paul had taken a brief, seemingly mundane video of a friend's dog that was staying in the kennels. The video was recorded at 8:44 in the evening, exactly 5 minutes before Paul and Maggie's phones ceased activity. While the video only showed the dog, the audio captured in the background was monumental. 3 distinct voices could be heard interacting playfully. Multiple witnesses, including close friends and family members, firmly identified the voices as belonging to Paul, Maggie, and crucially, Alex Murdaugh. This single piece of digital evidence completely dismantled Alex's ironclad alibi. It placed him at the exact location of the crime, with the victims, mere minutes before the fatal event occurred. The digital forensic web only tightened from there. Investigators analyzed the health application data on Alex's phone, which recorded his physical steps. The data showed that during the time he claimed to be asleep on the couch, his phone was recording a flurry of rapid, continuous steps, indicating highly active movement. Furthermore, the telemetry data extracted from his Chevrolet Suburban provided a precise log of the vehicle's operations. The data showed the vehicle being shifted into gear, the speed it traveled, and the exact times it arrived and departed from various locations. The vehicle data corroborated the timeline that Alex had frantically left the Moselle estate, driven to his mother's house for a highly unusually brief visit of only 20 minutes, and then returned to Moselle. The comprehensive digital picture painted a narrative of a man scrambling to establish an alibi immediately following an unthinkable act. On the 23rd of January 2023, the trial of Alex Murdaugh commenced at the Colleton County Courthouse in Walterboro, South Carolina. The proceedings captured the attention of the global public, broadcasting the intricate details of forensic science and legal maneuvering into millions of homes. The prosecution, led by the state's top attorneys, presented a meticulous, data-driven case. Over the course of 6 weeks, they called nearly 80 witnesses to the stand. They methodically introduced the financial evidence to establish a compelling motive, demonstrating how the impending exposure of his decades-long fraud provided the catalyst for the tragedy. Financial experts detailed the complex web of forged checks and shadow accounts, painting a portrait of a man desperate to preserve his legacy and avoid incarceration. The prosecution then transitioned to the forensic evidence. Telemetry experts took the stand to explain how a modern vehicle acts as a black box, recording every shift of the transmission and every press of the accelerator. Digital forensics analysts walked the jury through the timeline, displaying the precise moments the victims' phones went dark. And then, in the quiet courtroom, they played the kennel video. The audio of the 3 voices, recorded just 5 minutes before the end, echoed through the chamber. It was a powerful, chilling moment that directly contradicted the defendant's repeated statements to law enforcement. The prosecution argued that the defendant used 2 different firearms to intentionally confuse investigators and create the illusion of multiple perpetrators. They highlighted the presence of gunshot primer residue on items belonging to the defendant and the suspicious absence of any biological evidence on the pristine clothing he was wearing when first responders arrived, suggesting he had meticulously cleaned himself and changed his attire before dialing 911. The defense team, composed of highly experienced attorneys, mounted a vigorous counter-narrative. They argued that the investigation by local and state authorities was fundamentally flawed from its inception. They contended that law enforcement failed to secure the crime scene properly, potentially contaminating evidence and allowing alternative suspects to evade scrutiny. The defense aggressively cross-examined forensic experts, pointing out the lack of direct biological evidence, such as transfer patterns, on the defendant's clothing or in his vehicle. They emphasized that the prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial, relying on timelines and digital data rather than an eyewitness or a confession. Furthermore, the defense argued that it defied all logic and human nature for a father to commit such a horrific act against his own beloved family merely to delay a financial audit. In a dramatic and highly unusual legal maneuver, Alex Murdaugh elected to waive his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and took the witness stand to testify in his own defense. Over 2 days of grueling testimony, he attempted to explain away the overwhelming circumstantial evidence. In a stunning admission, he confessed on the stand that he had lied to investigators for over a year regarding his whereabouts on the night of the incident. He admitted that he was, in fact, at the kennels at 8:44. Confirming that it was his voice in the background of his son's video. He attributed his previous lies to a deep-seated paranoia brought on by his decades-long addiction to opioid painkillers and a distrust of the state police. He wept on the stand as he spoke of his profound love for his wife and son, vehemently denying that he would ever bring them harm. The cross-examination by the lead prosecutor was a masterclass in legal confrontation. The prosecution systematically dismantled the defendant's new narrative. They challenged his assertion of opioid-induced paranoia, pointing out that his actions that night, establishing an alibi, interacting with his mother's caretaker, and orchestrating the timeline, demonstrated a highly lucid and calculating mind. They forced him to admit, before the jury and the world, to the extensive list of financial crimes he had committed against vulnerable clients who had trusted him. The prosecution effectively utilized his admission of lying to law enforcement against him, asking the jury a simple, powerful question: if the defendant was capable of looking his clients in the eye and stealing their life savings, and if he was capable of lying to the police about the last time he saw his family alive, why should the jury believe anything he said on the witness stand? Following 6 weeks of exhaustive testimony, thousands of pages of documents, and profound emotional displays, the case was handed over to the 12 members of the jury. Given the sheer volume of evidence and the complexity of the digital forensics, legal analysts anticipated a lengthy deliberation process. However, the jury reached a consensus with astonishing speed. After less than 3 hours of deliberation, they informed the court that they had reached a verdict. The courtroom was shrouded in a tense, heavy silence as the clerk read the decision. The jury found Richard Alexander Murdaugh guilty on all counts, including 2 counts of the highest degree of murder. The following morning, the presiding judge delivered the sentence. In his closing remarks, the judge spoke directly to the defendant, reflecting on the historical weight of the Murdaugh family's legacy in that very courtroom. He noted the profound tragedy of a man who had utilized his knowledge of the law not to uphold justice, but to subvert it for his own preservation. The judge emphasized that the evidence of guilt was overwhelming, and that the betrayal of trust, both to his family and to the legal profession, was absolute. He subsequently sentenced the defendant to 2 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The resolution of the Murdaugh case sent shockwaves through the legal and social foundations of South Carolina. It prompted a massive reckoning regarding the concentration of power and the lack of oversight in rural judicial circuits. The state initiated sweeping investigations into the financial practices of the region's legal institutions, leading to the recovery of millions of dollars for the victims of the defendants' embezzlement schemes. For the surviving son, Buster Murdaugh, the aftermath has been an agonizing journey of navigating public scrutiny while grieving the total destruction of his family. The Moselle estate, once a symbol of generational wealth and power, was eventually sold, its dark history forever etched into the soil of the Lowcountry. The Murdaugh saga stands as a chilling testament to the lengths to which an individual will go to protect a fabricated reality. It highlights the incredible evolution of modern criminal investigations, where the silent witnesses of cell phones, vehicle telemetry, and digital footprints can speak for those who no longer have a voice. The meticulous work of forensic analysts ensured that the truth, no matter how deeply buried under layers of privilege and deception, was brought to the light. It serves as a stark reminder that the law, at its absolute best, is a great equalizer, capable of holding even its most powerful practitioners accountable. As we reflect on the tragic loss of Maggie and Paul, and the dismantling of a century-old dynasty, we are left to ponder the nature of deception. When a person spends a lifetime mastering the art of manipulation, constructing a fortress of lies to maintain an illusion of perfection, do they eventually lose the ability to distinguish their own fabricated reality from the truth? Or does the pursuit of power simply blind them to the humanity of those they are meant to protect?